Hello and welcome to my Tuesday night live painting demo. And I believe I'm up and on now. I'm going to turn on my sound just to see if everything is going correctly. Tonight I'm going to be painting this painting of a young woman named Pasha. She's a Ukrainian model, and I found her photo initially on Pinterest. Sorry, I'm just adjusting a little bit to get going here. And and then I found her YouTube profile, and from there I went through her photos. I did have a vote a couple weeks ago, about the photo to use, and I did paint her last week. And then after I made all that selection, then I came across this one, so I decided to do this one also. The challenge of this painting is that it is a couple things, that the dark areas are so dark, and so that means a lot of value control in the dark side, or just to leave a lot of detail out. Let me see, get her chin a little bit lower here. Let's do some measuring. Um, that's the right spot there, the top down. Um, so that's in the right spot. Let's get the side of her face in the right position. It comes to about there. Okay. And besides the darks being very dark, the other challenge is just the how smooth her complexion is and how subtle the changes are in the light side of her face. So all around, I'm going to have a lot of challenge with overall texture and value. So we'll see how that goes. I also I changed my setup just slightly. Oops, I just banged it pretty hard. Changed my setup just slightly. I turned my palette around, and let me just adjust this now that I whacked it. Okay, sorry I'm making you all dizzy, but no, I did. Okay, I see what I did here. Let's make a mental note: is don't hit my camera in the future. Well, I'm not going to be able to straighten that out very easily. But what I was saying about my camera is that flipped it around so that my hand is coming in from the other side, because I found it kind of distracting last time that I had my hand going in one direction and the other direction at the same time. So we'll see if that improves. Let me see if I can figure out how to straighten this thing out, though. There we go. That's what I needed to do. Okay, now it's perfect. Um, Let me see. So let's get back to the thing that you guys came here for, which was to see me paint and talk about my painting, and not so much my setup. Okay, I'm just kind of getting an indication where things are. And again, you'll see my arm in front of the camera every time I measure. So I want to see where the line of her shadows are here. Need to get a measurement of her bottom of her nose. All these landmarks are very important. This is where I ran into some trouble last week in measuring, because I'm used to measuring from above the panel, but now my camera is there. So the bottom of the nose is going to be somewhere around here. That puts her eye, corner of her eye, right about there. Let's see if I can get a measurement of that. The eyes, placement of the eyes is one of the hardest things for me. And so it's not such a bad thing for me to measure it a few times before I really commit to it. So something like that. You can see where I have the other eye drawn in. It's like crazy high. So I'm going to just scrub that out and go again. Okay, from the side, corner of the eye is about right. And then from the corner of the eye to the top, is, that's pretty good. Okay, so something like that. I can now lower her eyebrows quite a bit. So I can see her eyebrow is going to be somewhere around there. So going to give her a much more forehead, and I'm just going to put down, try to mix a little bit of this flesh tone, half tone. Sometimes it's called half tone, where we talk about the average color of the light side of the face. And so I want something that's sort of light pink. I want to get it a little bit grayer. And to do that, I have to mix a little bit of black or green in here. So I'm going really for the forehead color. Let's just go a little bit redder and a little bit lighter. I think that should get me partially there. Let's just get a little bit of gray in here too. Lighter. So I can modulate the intensity a little. Go lighter with that. So here I have something that's just a touch of warmth and gray. And that looks like it's going to have to go even lighter, so I may end up not having so much black in that. Something like this. Yeah, that's looking better. And there tends to be a little bit more color as you get towards the shadow's edge, and you can see. Let's get a little more orange in there. And then it goes really red in here. Okay. So I'm just scrubbing in those colors. I'm just trying to knock out some of the marks that I've made that weren't quite in the right place. And then this area gets a lot of black in it. Let me switch to a bright. That'll help me cover a lot more ground. And it's a little bit softer. So with a bit of oil mixed in it. And I do want that redder. So I'm going to mix a little bit of the alizarin permanent in there. Both are very fairly transparent color. Something like that. That's where the eyebrows are. Just really getting this very oily, nice and thin, so I can just get a lot down with just a little bit of paint. And I'm really looking more for the overall graphic quality of it, just to get the placement of everything. Then I can come in and paint in a lot more of the subtlety of it. Just sort of being quick about it initially. Okay, I've got too much black in this, really, because when you add a lot of white, it's going to zap the intensity of the color anyway. And here in the side of the nose, I do have to go a lot lighter. So let me do a bit of cleanup so I can get to where I need to go. Just use my old Home Depot window scraper. Does a really good job cleaning up the palette. Those are just a few dollars. Okay, and I can't, I have to train myself to put more yellow in the paint, so I tend to leave it out, and then my whites push everything too cool. That's too much yellow, but as I add more white, it should balance out. Okay, let's see. Okay, that's better. Let's get a little bit of that darker red that's coming in around the eye. And she has this really subtle green color in her iris. I'm going to go a lot stronger, but by the time I add everything else, it's going to lose a lot of color. And I want to go fairly dark in the white of the eye so I can get those really nice little glints of reflection in there. If I don't go dark enough, then those aren't going to pop really. So I'll end up losing those. Let's get her eye a little bit more towards the corner. Throw the black that's in there in her pupil. And I want to bring this eyebrow low enough. It's got a bit of orange in it. Yeah, there's a lot of paint down already on the panel, so it's picking up a lot of the underlying color as I paint. Okay. And I hope the sound is coming in okay. I'm going to do a quick sound check just to make sure and see. I'm not actually hearing the sound, so I have my mute off. Let's see. Yep, I'm hearing it in my earphones. Okay, so I'm going to keep on going. So far, no major technical difficulties, which is good. And then I want to pay attention to how much negative space I have here, so I know how far out to put the side of her face. I might do a quick measurement of the eye again to make sure I'm in the right place. Still looks pretty good. I'm painting both sight size and 1:1 scale so that I can measure directly from my reference that's on the computer screen to the panel. All those measurements should be exactly the same. I'm going to come in with a lot more white here. And get those little details of anatomy so I can tell people where the form is turning in space. And then got this pink, nice pink color in the cheeks. I'm going to get a little bit of the quinacridone red in there, which is has a very high tinting strength to start to pick up that pink, and a little bit of the warmer red, which is the naphthol. And maybe a touch of orange in there. And this is all, in the end, I'm going to make this fairly smooth, either through additional layers on top, transitional colors, or through blending, which I'll try to limit the blending because it often doesn't have the right aesthetic look if it's done too much. And I want to get a little bit grayer as we get towards the side of the nose there, and a quick measurement here. That's on the money. I'm going to just put a hint of where her nostril is. And the shadow. Again, measuring as I go. I'm going to go much darker. And this is just like a big jigsaw puzzle, putting one shape against the next until it's all put together. and you see a lot more color at the border between the shadow and the light. And I want an indication of where the ear is. Okay, just lightly at first. And then I'm going to come in with the black and start to define that a little bit. Let's throw some black here just for fun. Okay, so I'm getting this indentation of the eyelid here. It plunges pretty deep, and so we get a strong black edge on one side, and then towards the eye, and then it softens on the edge that's away from the eye, and that will help us understand that um, it's moving outward fairly quickly towards us. And let's get that darkness in the corner of her eye if I can. With this, I may have to switch brushes to do this. So it's just fairly tight in there. Okay, and this is where I'm going to have to come back in and really refine those shapes so that it reads correctly. And you can see I'm going to switch brushes so I have a little bit finer point on this old round bristle, or maybe it's an old filbert, but it's coming to something like a point. As I paint with it more, it'll get a little pointier. But I want just a warm gray that's representing the white of the eye here, not white like the panel, but it is actually pretty dark. But that means to get that to read, I have to get all of the darks around it dark enough, which I don't have yet. Okay, that's starting to get there. Let's pull that up a little quicker. Okay, I probably need a little bit finer brush to do the details around the eye, so I'm going to grab, fortunately some of these brushes that had a bit of a point on it now are a little bit fraying a little bit, but I'm going to try to get the dark rim of her iris in. And then the darker edge, the darker green that's at the top of the eye. Just because it's catching less light and less light is reflecting through it. And then I have a little bit lighter blue closer to, it's actually kind of greenish, closer to the edge of the iris and the white of the eye. See if I can get there. So something like that, and then I almost have pure white, those little spectral highlights there. So I'm just getting a little bit of white on the tip of the brush and just dabbing it. Let's try that again. Let's see if I set up the values correctly, because I do need that white light enough for that to read. Yeah, I think it's starting to get there. And I need a little more color underneath her eye And it needs to be just a touch lighter so that the values are reading correctly. Okay. And that lower lid isn't quite tight enough to the eye, so I need to correct that. Just pulling it up a little bit. So being able to make those finer adjustments is really important in the end to the overall quality of the painting. When you have that level of control, then the outcome is does more of what you want. So it's taken me a long time to get to this level, and there's more control that I want to be able to get, but I'm not quite there yet. But it's just with time and practice. Just go a little bit darker here on the lower edge of that eyelid. There. And still need to get that little bit of a corner higher. Get the eyelid to come up and then over. Okay. Starting to get there with that. I am missing the dark edge of the underside of her eyelid right here and a little bit of lash. Okay, overall that looks pretty good. Okay, gonna say, okay, looking at your comments, Yahide, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, says, watching you inspires me. Well, thank you very much. And Aziomas says, sound great. Okay, good. The sound is working. And let's try make some subtle changes to the eye. I am going to start to work out away from it. Let's get a little higher with this brow. Get some yellow or orange in this black here. And a little more black in the black. Got a little bit too much oil in it, and it was just a little bit too thin. Okay, and she just has a little more arch there in her eyebrow than I gave her. I'll just get that straightened out. Okay. That's not too bad. Let's see if I can give her a little more eyelid right here. And then give her that really dark accent in there. Okay. And then soften up the edge of it a little so that it starts to read, and then I need to go lighter up here. Okay. I think we got a good start on that eye. Just giving her some of the forms around her mouth. into the mouth a little. Okay, there's a light side of her mouth and a dark side, and her lower lip. And I can create the illusion of a highlight by just leaving a little bit of panel showing, but eventually I'll come in with white. But it's just a quick way of me seeing it. Don't always have to come in with white on top. Sometimes you can do it with a little bit of panel showing. Is one effect, more like watercolors. And I want to go right to black in here, if possible. Okay, and did I not make her chin low enough? Let's get another measurement here. So from the bottom edge of the panel to her chin is, okay, I have something a little bit off, but I'm going to have to figure it out eventually. And I think I may just have the bottom of her lips a little bit too low, and then her chin maybe not wide enough, so maybe that will help us a bit. Okay, and I remember from painting her before that her face is, her chin is rather square, and so it's very deceptive about how steep to make the edges of her jaw. Okay, I'm going to paint in a little more of the background so I can see my values better. I can see the edge of her jaw is in pretty close there. Have her fur coming out. So that area of the background is going to be all black. And I'm just going to start to indicate where that other eye is, so I don't have this white hole in the panel. I can go pretty black here. This is an area that just really has no light hitting it. Just going to throw a bit of dark orange here for the shadow part of her fur collar, her fleeced collar, whatever material it is. And there's a little bit of touches of yellow in there too. let's get a little bit darker on the shadow area of her forehead so it starts to read correctly. Get a little purple in there, the dioxazine purple, to make it help get it darker. Okay. A little bit of her hair color, and then back to the flesh color of her ear. I mean, of course, there is no flesh color, but the color and values that are in her ear. Okay. So then I can see I need to pull in her jaw a little bit. Okay, and I need those dark reds and oranges that are in her neck to get that reflected light to read that's on the bottom edge of her chin here. And her ear actually comes in a bit higher here. Okay, I kind of have to be ruthless with these darker values. They have to be pretty close to black, a value 9, 8, or 9 to read correctly. A little bit lighter on this side. I'm going to try to hit that nostril note again. That's a little bit better. Just really focusing too on the shape of her face, because if that part isn't right, then everything starts to fall apart a little bit. Just give her a little more white on this side. I came a little bit too low with that eyelash there. And there's a little bit of a serpentine shape to her nose. It kind of starts a little bit on this side and then gets a little bit darker coming out this way. So I want to pay attention to those subtleties. Get that strong hit of red that's right there. And there's still red continuing up here. I have some of my lightest lights coming in right here above this eyebrow. Okay. So far, so good. Just getting those little flecks of color that are in there. I think the only way to get her eyebrow color is purple mixed with orange. It's kind of a weird back and forth between those two colors in there. And I gotta get these transitions smoothed out a little bit more so they're not jumping all over the place. That's looking a little bit better. Have a hint of light right here on the other nostril and a hint of a little bit of red color in her cheek there, so I can go a bit lighter. Then really almost black underneath her nose. through a lot of alizarin permanent in this painting. Okay, let's get that background a little more solid. It's going to take several layers of black paint to really get that nice rich black that I'm looking for. Okay. Just get a new paper towel. So let's play with the eye that's in the dark side a little bit and see if I can get that to read the way I want. So where is that? I guess this was the detail brush that I had. It's not very much of a detail brush because it's pretty big. It's almost hard to get dark enough in the white of her eye there. Tendency is to want to go lighter, knowing that it is white. And I'm getting a hint of a lighter value right on that edge there. That's really the part that we see. And I think the trick is purple here. Going a little bit more purple, making sure I get enough black in there. Okay, that is looking a little bit better. Okay, and then I want these two dots of white, 2 or 3 dots that are sitting in there. They're pretty subtle. They're just enough to kind of help us see what's going on. Hopefully I have those in the right spot and I don't have to come back and repaint them. Okay, let's try to get some of those subtler shapes in the light side of the face here so that everything pulls together nicely. Okay, and I know I'm going to have this nice, beautiful highlight right on the edge of her nose there. And then a little bit of a river that's on the bridge of her nose. That slowly comes up that way. Okay, that's looking good. Okay, let's just get that hint of purple that's coming in right here. A little bit of magenta. Not quite light enough. And then a little bit of lighter value that's right there. It's got a touch of orange in it. Okay, now I gotta do a better job of defining the edge of her face here. Just working on that shadow edge on her nose so it's reading correctly. There's a little bit of a turn here that tells us that the tip of her nose is coming forward. So that's a real subtle thing that has to be right. And Shahad Shehati says, I loved it. Thank you. Okay, let's get a bit of her neck in. Going kind of in the orange direction. And there's areas of her neck that are lighter than parts of her face, and then areas that go a little bit darker. I think overall it's reading as about the same. Usually I like it if there's a difference between the neck and the face as a way of um, defining the depth a little bit. Get that clef of her chin going. Right here with a strong warm red. Just a little bit of painting in those highlights on her lip so you can better define the position of her lips. And that vision in her mouth needs to almost go to black. Just giving her a little bit of that lighter edge that we see where her upper lip starts to turn, it flares up and then down. So typically there would just be a lighter edge along the top of the upper lip. Okay. Okay, let's continue on our neck. I got a little distracted there with making adjustments in the face, but eventually I do have to have the whole thing painted, so, or at least that's a personal goal of mine, to have a completed painting by the end of the demo. Doesn't always happen, but try to get there anyway. Pull her jaw out a little bit further than what I have it. Okay, and I kind of want a cool white for the fleece here. Let's get a little touch of green in it. I can get a little bit greener in some spots. That'll help in the transition from light to dark. But then there's some parts that read pure white that are a little bit blown out in the photo. So I'll have to come back in with white on top in the end. And obviously there's some areas here that are much darker or need to go darker. There we go. looks about right for now. Okay. And again, working on that shape of her face so that it's reading correctly. Okay, that's way too light. This barely has some white in it or something. And then, but I want it to read like a dark pink next to the black of her hair. Let's get that red shape in her ear so we can start to see the anatomy in there a little bit. Okay. So Jennifer says, it's already spectacular. You seem to be painting with ease. Well, I don't know about with ease, but um, yeah, with practice, some of these things come a little bit easier. And just you just get an idea of where you want to go, and then you have the ability to execute that a little bit easier. But years and years of struggling with that, yes, does eventually get you there. So last week I made her face much more slender than it was. I think that's a clue that I'm starting to do that again. And then I have to decide whether I care. Because I'm not trying to get a perfect match to the photo, I'm just trying to get the idea of it. And sometimes the idea of it reads well without it being perfect. Perfect meaning not an exact replica of the photo. Okay, so let's see if I can get that color again of the shadow side of this fur area. Just scrubbing in the color there. I can add a touch of the oil to make it go down a little bit smoother. I think that's good. my beigey white here. Actually, a little bit of purple in there, but that's okay. It's not too far off from the color that I'm seeing. It looks like I'm going to have several passes of white until I get some spots light enough. Okay, it looks like I may have put her tip of her nose a little bit too low, so I'm going to try to get a remeasure of that, and I can still make some pretty significant adjustments at this point. Yeah, so I want the tip of her nose to be higher. I want to move her mouth up a little bit higher, and then try to keep her chin, bottom of her chin's about in the right spot. Um, but that's why I was feeling like I was making her chin a little too short. So I'm just going to carve the nose. Um, leave the tip of it, the highlights, those things actually look like they're in about the right spot. Just needed everything else to be higher. Okay, that looks better already. So then I got to do the same thing with the mouth. Let's get that groove of her upper lip, the philtrum looking right. And yeah, just work the mouth up just a little bit higher. Also, the division in her lips are going to be higher too. Yep, may have moved that up a little bit too high, so I can come back down a little bit. Okay, maybe the mouth was close to the right spot already. Okay, and now I'm trying to get that separation between the cheek and the chin. There's a little bit of a subtle depression usually there in the right along the edge of the jaw. Okay, that's starting to look a little bit better. Gonna, the tip of her nose is still a little bit too broad. Let's see if I can get that highlight is in the right place. So I need to move that shadow over just a little bit. Something like that, and then the shadow underneath her nose just has to trim. Need to trim it just a bit. Okay, that's looking better. Okay, let's see. Just gonna keep on going here. Back to the neck. Some really beautiful colors in there. Hopefully I can mix them to get something close. Let's get that little bit of a darker edge shadow underneath her jaw. And this edge of the neck has to go darker so that we read it dropping off into the shadow. There we go. We got a little bit of anatomy there, that dip in the throat and her chest coming in here. Transition to her chest. Need to get just a bit more yellow in the paint here. It's getting very cool. Okay. Lighten that up a little bit and get the shadow just a bit darker here. Let's use some of that darker orange red in the forehead because I need to keep on pushing this darker. Some nice oranges and greens in there too. And then we need a softer transition right in here. Okay. So in the end of the day, I would want most of the transitions to be very soft so that you're not overwhelmed from the brushwork, that you're seeing more of the subtle changes in the colors in her face. Throw a little more yellow in there. And there's a little bit of pink that leaks out towards the edge of the cheek here. And down. Okay. Still, so my challenge for the rest of the painting is really to smooth out some of these areas that are kind of choppy. Assuming that I have everything close to the finished value. Still, I think I have probably, if I stand back and look, I have quite a bit of adjustment left to go. This transition here above the eyebrow to be more subtle. Okay, and now I need to actually just sit back a little bit and look and see where any of the drawing might be still off by a bit. Like I said, I have the tendency to make her face not wide enough. bit of a indent curve this way. Let's soften up some of these forms in her chin a little bit. Okay, need some of the anatomy of the eye to really be um, clear that it's whiter. Okay, let me see. Rishi says it's cool to be able to watch you paint live. Um, this three panel view is the perfect setup, by the way. Thank you for sharing your process. Oh, you're welcome. Yeah, it took me a little bit of courage to get the webcams working. I had been using my phone for the longest time, and it was working, but not quite satisfactorily. But I kind of stuck with it much longer than I needed to. Part of the problem was I couldn't get the webcams to work properly at first, and part of it was just um, I didn't realize. I just thought it wasn't working, and part of it was I just needed to um, restart my computer and reload everything from scratch for all the sounds and the video to come in correctly, and then get the bit rate levels right so that it wasn't taking up so much bandwidth that it was getting all choppy. So I think this is actually pretty good. It doesn't look too bad. Um, I am just going to take a second and I'm going to um, adjust the values that you're seeing in the painting so that it looks closer to the right value. So let me do that right now. So I can adjust the brightness a little bit. Actually, I want to go a little bit the other way, a little bit darker, and maybe a little less contrast. less contrast. More contrast. Sorry. So there's a little bit of a time delay in the levels, so I have to be a little bit patient. You're still, it's the lightest lights are still getting blown out a little bit. Okay, just give me a second. It was probably not too bad to begin with, so. Okay, almost. Okay, needs a little more contrast and a little bit darker. Okay, that may be the best I'm gonna get here. Actually, that's getting a little bit better. Yep. Okay, that's closer to what I'm seeing. Okay, so hopefully on your monitors at home, it's a little closer to what I'm seeing on my monitor. It's a little bit hard to judge what other people are going to see on their devices, but hopefully there's a common enough color range that it shouldn't be too bad. Getting a little bit of the stronger color I see in the cheek without being too hard. Need enough, go dark enough so that the little bits of light that I put in there are going to read correctly. So a little bit of pink here on the side of the nose. And we got some lighter pink right along the edge of the nostril here. And some lighter lights too, right near that little bit of highlight. And those are important too because it's helping me read the anatomy in the nose, making sure that I get the placement right. Including this little bit of darker edge here along the edge of the nostril. And a little bit of red that comes out right here. It's very subtle. If I can get those to read correctly, then it'll be really nice. And similar with the tip of the nose, just clean that up a little bit. And there's a little bit of a coarse shadow right here. And that continues up black with a little bit of the alizarin permanent. And getting those darks to read, you really can't have any white in there at all, or very little, or it disturbs the richness of that dark. So you have to be careful not to get too much white on the brush. Make sure it's pretty clean before you start mixing the paint. And then let's come in a little bit tighter here on that edge of the nose. That's not too bad. Need to get a little bit darker in the forehead here. Okay, now there's some pretty choppy brush strokes in here that I need to figure out how to smooth out. And this is a bit of the challenge of the style of painting that I do. You need a very soft brush and a delicate hand, which I don't have, to just knock those back a little bit. Okay, that's a little bit better. Smooth this out a little. Okay, starting to get there. Improve the shapes a little bit that are around the edge of the eye there. Come back in and hit some of those accent marks with a smaller brush. Really need to buy some of those really small rounds to be able to get some of these a little bit better in the future, but you can still get some pretty clean small lines with bigger brushes, especially if you can put down one pass and then adjust it with a second pass. Just getting a little bit of that reflection in her hair. Just tends to be, with shiny hair, you want a little bit of contrast between the highlight area and the hair color, including going into richer darks too to get it. You see quite a bit of color in the shadow here. And the eye color I have going is just it's a little bit too light in parts, and it's kind of reading as false, so I have to come in a little bit darker with those, even though I liked the effect overall. Okay, I need a brush that's not quite as beat up as this one. So let's try this. Just by getting a little bit of color right on the tip of the brush, I can have a little bit more control. I need a kind of fairly slender dark line right in there. And then got a little bit of bluish white that comes in right underneath. Okay, a little bit of back and forth then. Okay. And then a touch of yellow that comes in right here. Sorry, I get a little bit quiet when I'm painting these finer areas just because I almost have to hold my breath to get my hands steady enough. is looking a little bit better. So it's actually starting to read as eyeball. And do you know what I want? I want just that little bit of white that's along the edge of her lower lid there, and that'll help it read as her eye being a little bit wet. It's just very subtle, but does the job. Okay, I see a new comment there. So, Mindy Alper, that's my sister. She says, "Hi AJ, nice." Hi Mindy. Rishi Canaria says, "What palette do you recommend for beginners, i.e., black and white, Zorn, etc.? Color mixing feels intimidating." So, I recommend, if you're just really beginning, is to buy student grade paints. They don't have quite as much pigment in them, or the pigment isn't quite as intense. So color mixing is a little bit easier because you don't the colors tend to blend together more easily. And then limited palette maybe is a good idea. A lot of beginner painters start in I don't do this, but I would recommend it to people that are just starting out, is to start with painting the underpainting kind of in a monochromatic, and then adding the color. Once you have the value structure, then adding in the colors from there, and that'll give you a lot more control. What I'm doing as I'm painting is I'm thinking about value and color at the same time, and that is a fairly difficult process. It requires a lot more juggling mentally, and so if you're just starting out, it may be easier if you're not dealing with that. If you're just getting the value structure first, and then you're coming in and almost tinting with color on top of that. You can let that underpainting dry, as some do, or um, you can come into it wet into wet, but you'll have most of the painting kind of resolved, and then you're just adding bits of color where it needs it. You're not going to get the same vibrancy of color if you do some of these things I said, but it'll be much easier to get to a realistic finish by doing that, and you won't be fighting trying to do both color and value at the same time. And then Shivani asked, "Hey, if you were allowed only one type of brush to use in your whole painting, which would you use? Flat, filbert, or round?" I think probably a filbert gives you a wide range of edges. I take that back. I've done whole paintings with flats, and I like the ability to shift from broader strokes to thinner strokes by changing the angle of the brush. You can do something similar with filberts, but it's not quite as refined. I do like a very new flat brush which has a nice sharp edge where you can do fairly thin lines with it, and so that's the brush that I would go with. Anyway, um, thanks for the question, and I know that ear needs to come in tighter, so I'm just going to work in that direction, because the edge of the face also needs to be a little bit tighter too. And that turn in her jaw is maybe a little bit lower, but it's right around there. Oh, it's really hard to paint dark enough here in the shadow. So it feels like her earlobe needs to just be a little bit lower. Kind of right there. And then so that her hair needs to come in just a bit tighter. Okay, let's see if I can really clean this up nicely with the time I have left. Which, so I've been painting for about an hour and 45 minutes, and um, let's see how I do in the next 15 minutes. I may decide to end it there, or keep on painting for a little bit longer. We'll see. Not really about really needing to show the brushwork as much as some other paintings that I've done, because just the nature of the light in this painting. It's this very soft Vermeer-like lighting. Let's see if I can get the sense of the forehead coming through the hair here in her forehead. That goes a little more orange, her strands of hair here. Okay, that's a little bit better. And then we got this nice, well lit strand of hair next to a dark edge here. And then the hair here is a little more orange. Let's get the darker. The hair falls out of the light just above the ear because the hair is tucked behind it. And then it falls into shadow. So I can just start painting black in that area. Okay, that's starting to read slowly. Okay, need to get a little darker here, this spot. And the color gets very soft as it moves away from us, a little bit out of focus. So let's see if I can get that to read like that. She's got a couple freckles. I'm just going to throw those in just to give us an idea of the surface of her skin. And she's got something interesting in the photo. There's like almost a bit of red that I can see. It's really a photographic effect against the lighter edge of her jaw there, her cheek. Just a little bit of that back and forth and giving it a softer edge in some spots will help us see it moving away from us in space. If I do it right and not be so clumsy about it. Like that. Let's try again. Just want a little bit of orange color in that white. And I need a little, just picking up a little bit of black in the background um, as I went over that area, and I have to be careful not to do that. And now I can carve in a little bit to adjust the shape. There. I think that's pretty close. See if I can get the anatomy of her chin a little bit better. Okay, some darker spots here and that softer shape around her lip. And it gets lighter right near the edge of the lip there. Let's get a little more orange in there instead of went a little gray. Okay, let me see. Shivani says, thanks for answering. Love your demos. Oh, thank you. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. That helps me um, get shown to more people, and then you also get alerts when I do go live, which so far almost is every Tuesday night. So you know where to find me. Okay, need to get a little bit better um, definition of this upper lip here as it comes across. Does have a bit of color in it. Okay, and there's the light is glistening a little bit on her upper lip. It's very subtle. Just getting just a little bit of paint on my brush each time, so I have a lot of control over um, the paint that I'm putting down in relationship to the paint that's already down there. So putting down these little soft strokes If I see I need to go a little bit darker or a little bit redder, I can just sort of stipple it in a little bit. This is a lot different than how I usually paint, which is with much broader strokes. Okay, that was a bit too light there. So I'm going to knock that back a little bit. Okay, and again, I'm going to carve a little bit of the edge there. Just improving the shape of the eye a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to put that highlight back in. And a touch of that yellow. I think that was a little bit too much. It's not too bad. And I got one little touch of light green. It's right there. got some a little bit of red that's in the white of her eye there. Let's see if I can get that color to read. That's a tough one. That's pretty close. Okay, let's get back to that cheek before I got distracted by that eye. Trying to get a clean pink right here. Oh, too dark. Okay, let's get that corner of her mouth in the right place. Something like that. And you see a little bit of red and orange around the outer edge of it. Let's get it dark enough. It's an important part of her expression right here. It tells you that she's pulling in the corners of her mouth, which means a little bit of questioning. I'm trying to think of the right expression. Just creates a slight bit of doubt. Or curiosity. Because it's not completely relaxed, you're making a slight shrugging with the mouth. I don't know if that's the right term. let's make this a little more subtle, this highlight on the nose. Okay, and I want the ridge of this brow to be a little softer. Come down just a bit lower. And we got to go a little bit darker in this area underneath the brow. I'm just pulling a little bit of paint off. That's another way to approach it, as opposed to putting paint down. You can pick up a little bit of paint off the panel, and that will lighten it a little bit. I gotta make these color changes in the forehead much more subtle. Just gotta get lighter. They're actually not too far off. It's just the transition between them is a little bit too strong. Same with right here in the forehead. This one spot has to be much closer in value. Let's get this upper edge of the nostril to read, or the flare, I should say, of the side of the nose. Just again, very subtle. Just getting sort of a milky wash here, and I'm just getting a little bit of color in it. Just need a little more color in that too, right of this area right above the brow. It's got a bit of red in it, but it's a very weak color. just modulating the colors in some spots, mostly to try to get the forms to read. Oh, I don't know where that color came from. It's not what I wanted to paint there. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay. Still got 9 of you with me, looks like, and I'm just going to keep on going. Just subtly, sorry for banging into my microphone, subtly working on this until it starts to read the way I want. Okay. Okay, feel free to ask me questions. I've been getting pretty quiet over here. Just adjusting things until I'm getting them to the way I want them to look. Oops. Oh, didn't even notice it that this got changed. Sorry. Let's fix this if I can real quick. I don't know how long it had been like that, but oh well. Okay, that's probably a little better. Probably when I was playing with adjusting the color, it probably reshifted. Okay, that's good. Okay, so fur. Focused on fur right now. That's kind of a tough one because there's all kinds of colors going on in this. Okay, and we got a little bit of blue even coming in right here. A pretty soft edge. And let's see if we can soften up some of this here. Got a touch of purple. Right in here, or maybe it's more blue. I feel a sneeze coming on. You guys are gonna try to block it so that I'm not blowing your eardrums out. that light pink that's in there. And that shadow, I guess it's from the reflection of her skin tones on her neck. And I'm trying to make shapes that mimic the fur, so you get a sense that it's of the texture that's there. Okay, I have a comment from Nick Meyer. Says, fantastic painting. I happen to be painting as well. That's great. I love it when people paint along. Um, and welcome. Okay, want a little bit darker here against this edge so that it reads as kind of facing upwards here. That's an important part of her anatomy. Also, I'm missing some lighter light in here in the side of the nose, so I'm just going to put a little bit more white in there till that starts to read. And soften it up a little bit. Need this area underneath the brow to be a little bit darker, and then the depression underneath that even darker. Okay, I'm going to start to squint down so that reduces some of the detail so I can start to see what the painting is missing or where I'm really far off. Oops, sorry about that. Just whacked my camera. Let's straighten it out a little. Yep, come on. Be good. Oh dear. Now I've done it. See if I can get that back in the right place. There you go. Okay. Okay, so where am I off? A little bit lighter here. Doesn't look like I'm too far off in the drawing. At least I can, from what I can tell right now. Probably just little things that need to be adjusted. See if I can get a little bit of that darker brownish color. That's the lower part of the brow. Need that indentation that's here. Okay, I'm starting to get these marks that are the shape of this brush, and so I don't want it to be so evident, the brush strokes. So I'm going to try to soften those up a little bit. Just in some places the paint's so thin on the panel, and it's kind of picking up the paint as I stroke it a little bit. So I have to be careful. Which means this brush may not be soft enough for what I want to do, but it's about the softest brush I have. Okay, that's a little bit better. Okay. So I think I've gotten to kind of a good spot to stop at this point. It's all about just painting in some of the subtleties, getting those right, and I can spend a fair amount of time doing that. So I'm going to stop where I am, and again, encourage you to subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I will see you here next week, and I will post the finished painting to my Instagram page in the next either tonight or sometime tomorrow if I manage to finish, or in the next couple days. So thank you. Thanks for watching. And let me see if I can do this. Okay. End stream.